Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, Hal.
So before we start our conversation, I wanted to kind of tell you what I've learned over the years as a headhunter about the 4 stages.
You're a headhunter?
Yeah, of a retailer's career. And I'm going to use you as an example. Stage 1, who is Brendan Hoffman? Stage 2, get me Brendan Hoffman. Stage 3, get me someone like Brendan Hoffman. And stage 4, who is Brendan Hoffman?
Which stage am I at?
You're at stage 2.
Okay.
You've got a long ways to go, which actually leads me to the next question. Kay Krill has an unusual status of being one of the few female CEOs in retail, and you have a similar status, gender notwithstanding, of being one of the youngest CEOs of a publicly held trade company. What is it about your leadership style and your skills that has allowed you to be chosen for this?
Well, I think I've been very fortunate. I've had great mentors along the way. I think I was certainly in the right place at the right time at Neiman Marcus when the internet was just becoming important. And so I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. And I think perhaps doing that at a younger age, as you pointed out, I knew I didn't know most of what I needed to know. And so I was really at the mercy of the team that was there at Neiman Marcus Direct at the time, and I was fortunate enough to have a great team that filled in my gaps, and I think that it taught me to step back and not pretend like I know everything, but to use the talent in the room. I never wanted to be the smartest person in the room, and fortunately, when I speak to the different disciplines within the businesses I've run, whether it be finance or marketing or IT, I certainly am not the smartest person in the room, and so giving them room just from the very beginning to help run the business within the strategy that I had set, I think was the leadership style I developed, really taking a lot of clues from Bert Tansky and the senior team at Neiman's at the day.
And you had other mentors besides Tansky, right? Because before Neiman's, you were working for Marshall?
Yeah. Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, Bert was certainly my mentor with a capital M. But I started my career at Lord & Taylor right out of college through the training program. And fortunately enough for me, Marshall Hillsburg took great interest in me for some reason back then, and was the first person at a much earlier age than I would have anticipated to kind of lay out my career track for me and what the potential was. And because of that, he spent more time with me than he probably did with others. And it was certainly very much appreciated back then, and certainly appreciated now in terms of what I learned from him. But really throughout the industry, I mean, I've just been very fortunate. I think it's why I like this industry so much. How generous people have been with their time with me along the way. Competitors, colleagues alike, in terms of, depending how you want to define mentoring, but mentoring me along the way, and that hasn't stopped.
Well, good, and I hope you're choosing someone to mentor as yourself. The topic is transformers. So when we talk about transformation, you were at the forefront of the direct business 12, 15 years ago, and now you're in the department store business. So I'm wondering, are you kind of like a reverse transformer, or what's going on here?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and it's one that was not lost on me when I started at Neiman's Direct December of 2002, and I remember shortly after that sitting with my team and saying how exciting it was to be in this space, because it was truly like the wild, wild west back then, because you really only had eBay and Dell and Amazon and maybe one or two others in the space. So we were really at the forefront. And thinking about comparing it to a 100-year-old department store business where probably every question had been asked and answered 1,000 times. And when you had new leadership come in, often they were just running a similar playbook that had been run before and perhaps not too successfully. Yet here with NeimanMarcus.com, we had this great opportunity. We were empowered to go out and test things and try new things and ask new questions, because even if they had been asked before, a year later, they deserved to be asked again because the space was changing so quickly. So it was really a very exciting time to be there and be part of that. knowing that the more you failed, the more you were going to ultimately succeed, because you were learning so much from that, and you were having a lot more victories than failures, or at least the victories had so much more potential to make up for the failures. And I think, as you said now, transforming back to a very traditional department store base, focused in the middle of the country, I think while some of what I compared that to 11, 12 years ago is still relevant in terms of a business that is, 100 plus years old, I think the internet now has permeated what we do as department stores or any sort of brick and mortar stores, that it's completely changed the landscape again. And so even running a department store, whether you want to call it multi-channel or omni-channel, whatever the appropriate word is today, it's completely revolutionized the way we look and run the business. And so I think that's made it a lot more exciting than perhaps it would have been 10 or 15 years ago if it was strictly just a single channel department store.
Well, let's talk about the Bon-Ton. Now, a lot of companies that have grown by acquisition have changed the nameplates of their company for a consistent and aligned brand. You've got 3 brands for you folks from New York. It's Yonkers, Bon-Ton, and Carson's.
Actually, I hate to correct you. We actually have a lot more than that, because we have Herberger's and Bergner's and Boston Store. So
okay,
we have quite a few. But I didn't know very many more than you did when I was first talking to them about the job. And quite frankly, Yonkers to me was always the town next to where I grew up. And to have Boston stores situated in Milwaukee was confusing, and Elder Beerman I forgot to mention in Ohio. So yeah, when I took over, we had these 7. We actually even had Parisians in a couple locations back then. I think I immediately assumed that my first big move was, as you suggest, to consolidate the nameplates. I had certainly studied what Macy's had done, and some of the obstacles they had gone through, but how they'd really been vindicated and validated, and what a success it's been for them. But a funny thing happened during that decision, which was I didn't know which name to go to, because Carson Prairie Scott is probably our most national name, but it's still very regional based in Chicago and the Midwest. So and then I also realized it was going to be very expensive to change the names, both capital intensive and marketing. So I held back and decided to go visit the stores. I always really planned to visit the stores before I made a decision like that. And I got out, as I said, to states I had never been to and cities I had never heard of, to see the 270 stores that part of our portfolio. And I guess I've been to about 200 at this point, 220, I think. But in the first 6 weeks, I made sure to see every region and try to get a little bit of flavor. And I went to Des Moines, Iowa, and realized Yonkers is their store there. I mean, it is a very important nameplate, as important as any the New York brands are to where we are here in the city. Yonkers, meant something to that customer, and if I was suddenly to put the Carson's nameplate on there, it would be a hit to sales, and at a time when none of us want to do that. So, and that was the same in St. Cloud, Minnesota, with Herberger's, and so on and so forth. So, it's something we've tabled for now. It would certainly make life a little bit easier, but not a whole lot easier. We've learned how to manage in terms of the marketing of these brands. Probably the place it would make it a little less clunky is the e-commerce business.
Oh, that's what I was just going to mention. How does that affect your e-commerce?
Well, I mean, it does and it doesn't. Once again, the sites are all the same. They're all managed as one. It's just the skin is different depending on where you come, and the technology is so that we know which banner you're entering. So it does hurt us a little bit just in terms of some of the efficiencies when you're out there on some of the search engines and elsewhere. But for the most part, at least, I don't even want to say the short term, but the medium term for the Bon-Ton, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to keep the names, the integrity of the names.
What percentage of your business is now on the internet?
Well, it's growing quickly. It's certainly our largest growth vehicle, as it is for many of us. We did less than 2% when I got there. We did 3% last year. This year, it's tracking towards 5% is the number we've put out there. So that means it will be about $150 million this year. It's really growing leaps and bounds on all aspects of what it's meant to do, both in terms of the commerce, but also the branding and being able to reach out to a younger customer as we all try to get younger. So we're really pleased with the progress we've made. When I got there, we were spending less than 2% of our overall budget on digital. Now that's grown up to almost about 10%.
No, I was just going to say, don't you think that your experience at Neiman's Direct really helped you leverage into the increase of the
Yeah, well, I
internet
mean,
business?
yes and no. I mean, having that foundation, it's kind of where, I cut my teeth on the .com side of the business has given me an appreciation for what that can mean, that hopefully I'll take throughout my career, and certainly both at Lord & Taylor and Bon-Ton. It was one of the first initiatives I put into place. But having said that, it's changed an awful lot since I stopped running a .com business, which was really 5 years ago this month. And we heard some of it earlier about the changes in the .com space. When I left Neiman's.com, Twitter was really just starting, so we didn't have a Twitter strategy. We had just started a Facebook strategy. So yes, I think the fact that I spent 6 years there and understood quite early on the power of this channel and how it could be integrated. Even when I was running NeimanMarcus.com, my predecessor there was Karen Katz, and she took over, obviously, Neiman Stores and now Neiman Marcus. And so we were able to work together, even though we were separate divisions, to try and figure out holistically how we looked at it from the customer standpoint, I think earlier than most others were. And so I think that's what I brought to both Lord & Taylor and now Bon-Ton. But I really feel, like a dinosaur when it comes to some of these new techniques.
Just imagine how the rest of us feel.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
The nasty little secret that we all know about internet shopping is that the percentage of returns is more significant than generally known.
Yeah.
What are you doing to reduce that?
Well, when I was at Neiman Marcus Direct, it was probably the thing that kept me up at night the most frequently, because as we grew the business and we were obviously selling very expensive merchandise, the returns grew exponentially. And I think once the customer realized how easy it was to actually send the return, once she figured out the mechanics of it, she realized that there was nobody she had to look in the eye to make that return. So we found a lot of Louboutin shoes came back with the red sole slightly worn away, indicating to me that they had probably worn it for 3 or 4 weeks before they got tired of it. And yet there was very little we can do. And I guess it peaked for me. My wife and I were living in Dallas. We were at a restaurant, and a lady walks by in a sweater, and she had the tag dangling out of the back of her neck. And instantly, the cynical side of me said, I didn't even know if it was from Neiman's. I couldn't tell. I said, she's wearing that, and she's going to return it tomorrow. And I was, about to jump out of my seat to go challenge her. And fortunately, my wife, as she often does, cooler heads prevailed, and she pointed out to me that quite likely the lady just didn't realize that the tag was there, and probably would have been quite embarrassed that it was there. So it's not quite as big an issue for us now at the Bon-Ton, because so much of the business at Neiman's back in the day, I can't speak for them today, was done outside of the store trade area. So, right. and because it wasn't integrated with the Neiman Marcus store division, it was a little bit clunkier in terms of the seamlessness of the return process to the stores. Today, with the Bon-Ton, we don't have that same sort of out-of-market potential that Neiman's does because of the brands we sell. So we get a lot more returns coming through the stores, which is actually a very good thing because, one, it prevents the anonymity of them making the return. So they do have to look our sales associate in the eye. But more importantly, we have them in the store, and hopefully when they get the refund slip in their hand, we can convert them to shoppers.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about your career is that you've moved your customer base around in your own life. For example, when you were at Neiman Marcus, you were Lord & Taylor twice, and now you're a much more moderate customer. How does that feel, or do you really care about who you're selling to or who your client base is?
No, I mean, I think I've enjoyed dealing with the different affluence of the customer base. When I started at Lord & Taylor, so I started a fairly mainstream department store. So I think, when I went to Neiman's for those 10 years, that wasn't where I had initially, laid my foundation. So the luxury side, while it was fun, didn't quite have the hooks in me, as maybe it does from somebody who started there. But I've always considered myself a student of the game, and always had great respect for people like Alan Questrom or Mike Ullman or Terry, who have gone from, just as you said, the different kind of levels, and so that's just part of the challenge that I think I've enjoyed.
All right, so I'll ask one more, and then we'll ask some questions of the audience. You've got 247 stores. What do you see in the next 3 or 5 years?
Well, our store base itself is staying fairly consistent, closing, opening 1 or 2 a year. Really, our big strategy right now is trying to understand that local customer better. So if you went back to 2000, what is now the Bonton, mentioned there's seven different banners, actually at 5 different offices, they were different companies, 5 different buying offices, 5 different marketing offices, 5 different store groups, and through the consolidations, over the last 10 years, we've consolidated them all into one. And as I've gotten, one of the things that's been learning for me is how complex this customer is compared to some of the other places I've been because of the spread out geography. And I think what we've done at the Bonton is we've homogenized that customer too much from our perch in Milwaukee to try and have the same sort of merchandising and pricing strategy that works in Chicago work in Nebraska. And as I said, as I've gone out, I spent 3 weeks ago, I was in Chicago, 2 weeks ago in the middle of Nebraska, and last week, in western Pennsylvania. The customer is very different. The way she lives her lifestyle is very different. And yet our stores look too identical in terms of the way we're merchandising and marketing them. So we've spent a lot of time over the last 6 months developing different methodology and process and technology to help us tear this apart without actually decentralizing, because we obviously can't do that. And I think we have a much better handle on who our customer is in the different regions and how to service her. And so, unfortunately, it's been masked during Q2 by the results, but I think there's a lot of progress being made behind that will pay off in the future. And so we're really anxious to get that fully rolled out. It's really just starting now, and with some of the different catalogs where we're versioning out catalogs for the first time, versioning out pricing. And so I think that for us, I mean, this is a turnaround. We're still in the early stages of that, but I think we need to get the business healthy, and then we can start thinking about some other ways to grow. But I think there's tremendous opportunity for us just shoring up our foundation, and I feel good about the progress we've made.
Great. Last quick question. This is your first Wall Street experience as the top dog. How do you like that piece of it?
Well, when the numbers are good, it's a lot easier. It's a little bit trickier when the numbers aren't up to expectations. But no, I enjoy the back and forth. I think for the most part, they have a real good handle on the business. I think going to quarterly comps has been really helpful for us, meaning in the industry, because we're not so held to the monthly 30-day snapshot. I think at least, while even quarterly at times can be a little bit too small of a snapshot, I think it's helped us manage the business more prudently. And so certainly I had experience at Neiman's being part of a public company, but as you mentioned, not being the top dog. And it was certainly different at Lord & Taylor at the time. They were private, and I was able to speak a lot more freely. I just had David Moyne, ask me why I'm not returning his phone calls as often as I used to.
Well, David, you can ask the first question.
But it was a lot easier when we were part of a private company. So it is different, but it was one of the things that I certainly wanted to learn and kind of check off my bucket list. And whether or not I want to put another check there, I guess I'll have to figure out way down the road.
Yeah, well, thank God the private equity world is active in our space. Anybody have any questions?
Brendan, you mentioned the 247 stores. A lot of them are in medium-sized markets. Is that part of the challenge? Because economically, they would probably be struggling more than other areas.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, about 270 stores. So I want to know. And medium would probably be generous to say they're in medium-sized markets. As I said, I spent the night in North Platte, Nebraska 2 weeks ago, and was happy to find the nicest restaurant in town was an Applebee's. So that my life certainly has changed since Neiman Marcus and our travel budget there. But I think the last speaker, Sarah, I mean, it was really interesting to hear what she had to say about how much this middle America customer is affected by payroll tax, gas prices. I mean, I never appreciated living here in New York and the businesses I was in before, what that means in terms of taking disposable income out of her wallet. And so, even during Q2, as I saw how the business was trending down, and yet was surrounded here by my Wall Street friends, there was such a disconnect between what was going on in Wall Street and what was going on in the Middle America that I've come to call home. And so, yeah, I do think it's part of the challenge, but hopefully, there's some brighter news ahead. We're thrilled that gas prices are coming down. We're thrilled it's getting cold. We'd like some other things to work in our favor as well. But yeah, I mean, right now, certainly that's part of the challenge, but it's factored into our strategy. It's why we need to understand that customer so much better than perhaps we could have done a few years ago. And, just one silly example is just understanding how important college sports are to the middle of America versus, here in New York, where you don't have that same collection of enthusiasm for one or two universities, yet, in Indiana or Michigan or Nebraska, you need to have 20% of the stores screaming, Nebraska Cornhuskers for them to feel like you get that customer base. And so there are things like that that we need to take better advantage of while we wait for some wind at our back.
Where's Moyne?
Brandon, if retail is really a window on popular culture, what is it that our middle American customers are telling us about American lifestyles and priorities today? What are the 3 or 4 key trends?
Well, I just think it's as was indicated earlier, she's struggling right now, and all these things working against her are just making it very difficult for her to make ends meet or have the wherewithal to spend, on anything that's not a necessity right now. I think as you go around to the stores and you spend some time in these markets, it just is really, and you talk to the associates, because our associates are part of the community certainly, and you just feel their pain about everything that's being done, and then you start to think about our own business and the rising medical costs, and how we absorb that as a company as opposed to passing it on to our associates, and the challenge it will be for them. And so I just think there's a lot of headwinds that hopefully the government is listening to, and we can start to give the people in the middle of the country especially, who are so impacted by this, a little bit of relief.
So Moyne's not here, but Palmieri is.
Uh-oh.
So just...
I've never seen the two of you in the same room, so...
You know what that means. Just wanted, the localizing the assortments that you were talking about, it works for the customer, but how about for the corporation as a whole, when your competition is, somebody doing some massive program where they can create some sort of, a huge business with a label or something like that.
Right.
Can you do that?
Well, I don't want to overstate what localization might mean. It's 20% of the overall assortment. I mean, clearly there's still a lot of consistency that work across the store portfolio, and as you point out, we need that in order to lay the foundation. But there's a lot of things around the 20% that I think can make a huge difference, and that's what we need to do. And it is, as you indicate, it is challenging. It is tough. That's why we spent 6 months with some higher price consultants that in with us, helping us figure out how to do that. It's why we're investing in the technology to allow ourselves to do that. But I think the thing that I'm most thrilled about is the company has really bought into it. It's not a hard concept to think about that you shouldn't merchandise Nebraska exactly the way you merchandise Chicago and Philadelphia. And so, that's making it a lot easier because there is a groundswell of support from the organization. It's an easy message to get out there, although as you describe, it's a tougher message to execute on, and that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
That's all the time we have for questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Brandon.